I come in bringing in goods into Nigeria. Fast Track was there. AEO is taking over. Yes, a lot of compliance has to be done, and it's being done by most of the businesses that are achieving it. But it's making self-declaration a lot easier. So you know your goods get to the port. Under the old Fast Track system, you can predict 3 to 5 days you should see it. Under the new system, I should expect it should even cut down to 1 to 2 days. That is an achievement by us. But the question is, what happens when you go out of Nigeria? Now, for us, we have the biggest plant in the continent today, but we're running at less than 10% capacity, and you have to like, why? And it's some of it because the factory is meant for 50% production into Africa. And today, if I want to go, you've got the AFCTA after, you've got the older one, which is the ETLS. And for us that have exported even in those regions, you laugh. When it goes out of Nigeria, if I want to send something to Ghana, between Lagos, Nigeria, Benin Republic, Togo, and Ghana, you might as well not take it by road. It's just not worth it.
So you go by sea, I guess, and then
because
come
by
back
road,
in.
the interpretation is the problem. It leaves Nigeria, and by the time it gets to the next country, it's a totally different interpretation of what ETLs becomes. And so you got a barrier of entry from country to country who actually are looking at it as income rather than integration. And that is what we need is integration more, understanding that, you know, if we look at the EU trade, Nigeria today, and if you look at Africa today, less than 16% is intra-African trade. And the greatest barrier to intra-African trade is the interpretation of movement of those goods. So if I want to go from Lagos to Ghana, and I want to drive it, and I've certified it in Lagos, in Nigeria, it should be as good as it is done all throughout. But what we're happening is the same thing in EU. If I take from France, which is the butt end of the other side, and I'm driving all the way to Poland, as long as it's been registered, certified in France, nobody checks it again.
Yeah, once you're in, you're in.
You're in. So the key thing for us really is interpretation. Then when it comes to those tariff understanding, yes, there's some things in the HS code, and I've been importing directly and studying the HS code myself in the last 15 to 20 years. And when you see interpretation, sometimes it's technically very difficult for you to understand. We understand that. I'll give you an example. One product which has been a confusion for so many years now is polyethylene. Now, but the HS code has a gravity of one side, a gravity of 0.94, greater and less. Then there is also one that says others. Is that others that literally create complication? Now, I use a product called cross-linked polyethylene, which basically means it's a very high level of technical know-how for you to even produce it in the first place. Now, what the other person is producing is base element. Now, I need cross-polyethylene to produce high-voltage cable. Now, for us in Nigeria, there's only 5 countries in the continent producing high-voltage cable. And we made Nigeria the first one, the 5th one, since 2015. There's been no 6th country producing high voltage.
And your company is the biggest in Africa, is that
it
right?
is.
Yeah.
But so what we need now is those technical interpretations sometimes need collaboration for understanding. And what we will always offer. For us, it's something we need to continue to do. And it's those understanding that make businesses easier. It's those things that also enable us to increase capacity or increase investment. Because the reality is the trade is an enabler. It is not supposed to be a disincentive to come into your country. It's supposed to enable businesses. I'm supposed to be able to say, I need raw materials, I get it quickly. I want to ship the goods out, I ship it out quickly. At the same time, I want to get to another country. So take integration. We're the biggest integrator you'll see in the industry today. I need copper from DRC. I need $120 million of copper from between DRC, Zambia, Namibia. To get it into Nigeria is the biggest joke because one, the system that allows it under the AFTA to get it duty-free is a problem. is understanding that from coming out of there. Then secondly, I need to ship out the finished product. So if we get it right, I can literally produce every cable in Nigeria today without leaving any part of Africa. All my raw materials will come from this continent, and I'll be able to ship out to almost 50% of the world doing that. So those are the things, for me, trade and understanding of what Nigeria's knowledge in customs and in trade needs to be passed around. And I think as Africans, and this is being truthful as Africans, we need to see ourselves as brothers and sisters, not competitors. I see African countries competing with each other.
You're talking about a mind shift.
Yeah, we need to change our system and believe that sharing information from knowledge from Nigeria, Benin, Togo, or whichever country is integrating more rather than competition for who takes more business out of each country. Thank you.
Thank you, George. And that's why I think forums like Customs Pact are so very important, that bring us together to actually, they're forcing that mind shift effectively. Now, I called you arguably the most interesting participant of this event. They call you Tractor 2. That's your nickname. Officer Ogboru, you hopped on a power bike and you rode all the way from Niger to Belgium, Brussels, Belgium, and back. You came back as well. You hit 22 countries, 21,000 kilometers in 72 days. Now, the theme of this forum is breaking barriers and building bridges. And you'll probably cross more bridges and barriers and borders than anyone else here. Now, you've seen customs operations from both sides, both as an officer and as someone who physically crossed all these multiple African borders on your motorcycle journey. What surprised you most about the difference between customs procedures and how they're supposed to work, and how they work in different countries as you were leaving Africa?
Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, senior officers. Thank you very much for that question. It was quite an experience traveling across borders. And what the WCO recommends, the trade guidelines for trade, has to do with simplification and harmonization, use of technology, and transparency and predictability. That's in theory, but in practical, it really didn't work out like that. What surprised me was, okay, first of all, I think we have the language barriers across the continents.
But you have those same ones in Europe as well, language barriers.
Yes, we are a growing economy, and I can say that from the first trip and this second one, things have improved. Even if we still have, the time frame that we spend at the borders, it's really high, because sometimes we spend a minimum of 1 hour, 30 minutes in some borders, because there are a lot of bottlenecks, there are a lot of checks, and there are a lot of balances. Now, it doesn't have to do with customs alone, because the customs in these regions, they are trying their best to ensure that trade facilitation goes on well. But then there are other bottlenecks, because there are other government agencies at the borders. So each agency is doing the same thing. So the same check, the same repeated checks.
Over and over again.
Over and over again. So if you get to the custom point, they do their check, and then the immigration does the same check, and then every agency. So if you have 4 agencies at the border, the 4 agencies are doing same check.
So you've got to go through 4 sets of paperwork,
Yes.
4 procedures before you can
Thing.
get back on your bike.
Exactly. So we need this synergy among the agencies at the borders. Unlike in Europe, where it was just the customs and the immigration that were at the borders. And I think they share information, so they don't need so much paperwork, so much questions. Once you get to, like at the Schengen at the beginning, once you get to the border, you present your papers, and it covers for all the countries
Which were some of the easiest borders to go through?
in
In
Africa.
yeah.
Uh,
Go on, you're amongst friends. Chatham House rules. Go ahead.
Yes, it was okay. Every country had its unique experience. Every country had its unique experience, and I could say like in Togo and Cote d'Ivoire, they already have this pre-arrival documentation. So if you put your laissez-passer, you fix in your details, and then you clock it in. By the time you arrive at the border, you just make your payments, and then you can move. So there was not much of you didn't need to do so much documentation in those places. I remember when I was entering into Togo, I'd already documented at the border. While I got to the exit point, I was unstrapping my bag to bring out the document, and the officer said, "Hold on," and then he put the plate number on the system, and he printed another paper, and he said I could use it for clearance, and that made passage easy in those places. But then also, even if the customs are trying to make it easier, there are still other bottlenecks. So even if the custom had made it easy for me to pass, the other people were still asking for the same documents. Right. So those are the issues that
There's certainly a red thread running through my panel here, despite, irrespective of the differences in your roles and responsibilities, harmonization, duplication, elimination of that. In many ways, an understanding of who we are and working together. Now, I mentioned, thank you, I mentioned that George imported and exported very complex equipment. It's not easy for the auto sector either, right? It faces its own unique customs challenges, complex documentation, classification, disputes sometimes, valuation questions of the value of what you're bringing in. I'm not just talking about the finished product cars. I'm talking about car parts and other things that come with it, right? Multiple regulations, safety, emissions, and things that come around, climate change and all those things. Chief, how do customs documentation requirements and clearance procedures affect your ability to maintain your inventory and to serve your customers well? And what's the biggest customs-related headache in your daily operations?
Good morning, everyone. When we talk of documentation as regards to Nigerian customs, I think in the recent past, there has been a lot of improvement. And I will say it without fear or favor. What has happened is that there has been a consistent reform. So those things that made this question to come up are actually fizzling away. I'll give you an example. We had a lot of issues when custom was migrating from one system, I think NICES or something, to BODOGO. But as soon as they got the BODOGO right, it made everything simpler. So you can sit down in the comfort of your office. I'm talking from the automotive point of view. Our major challenge now is actually not custom, but the sister agencies. Where customs HS code for a pickup is actually not the same thing an agency like SLN is setting up. So when you don't have any issue with custom, you fill your Form M once your classifications are right, because it is now easier. Once you put one or two keywords, it will pop it up. It makes life easier for everyone. But the conflict will now be, if you want to upload your PAR, if any of those agencies are not in harmony in terms of the HS code, then you are stuck. So this is actually the major challenge we are having now. We have confronted the agencies and they told us they're trying to harmonize with custom and the rest of them. So interagency synergy will actually do the magic. But in terms of customs, what we're just hoping that the reform that is going on will continue to do, where we must not need to go to a clearing agent for us to be able to access SGD. So that the duty of the agent will be, we will do the right thing, because sometimes if you go for examination, they will come and tell you, wrong this, wrong that. But the problem is that it's not the problem of the person, but you take responsibility because you appointed your agent. But we want BODOGU to go a step further, that the importer or the manufacturer will sit in his comfort, do your Form M, also assess your SGD, pay your duty, then hand over to your clearing agent to go and face custom with examination, release, and the rest of them. But I want to tell you, as far as Nigerian custom is concerned today, honestly, they are adding value.
I think that's a great round of applause and an endorsement. I'm going to go back down the line now, Mr. Farouk. From your vantage point, you're managing operations, I guess, in multiple jurisdictions, am I correct? So what's, looking at these different jurisdictions, what is the single most frustrating inconsistency that you often encounter when you're dealing with different customs administrations across the continent of Africa? Is it things like documentation requirement? Is it clearance procedures, or is it something else entirely?
Interagency collaboration.
If you could move the microphone a little bit closer to you.
Unless I hold it like this.
No, it's fine. Yes.
I think interagency collaboration is one of the biggest challenges. Let's not forget there's the movement of people. I think that's pretty okay. Movement of goods, that's where you start to get the issues. Movement of services has been fully digitized now, where you can do consultancy banking services without physically moving. Now, when you're moving goods, you have to look at Africa in the context of Africans, because we keep talking about this Africa like it exists. And you made a very interesting remark, which I wanted to comment on, when you said, oh, Europe also has multiple languages. No, it doesn't. Europe has probably 80 languages at best. We have 3,000 languages. I mean, every 50, 60 kilometers you move, there's a new set of nationality that exists outside this map that we've drawn. And when you go to these borders, there's free trade. It depends on whether you have paper or not. But the Africa Free Trade Area exists from a tribal transactional standpoint. We have border towns that move paperless, easy, 5 minutes, just like Luxembourg and Germany. But there's no documentation. There's no regulation. It just happens. Then you have businesses like ours. Now, in businesses like ours, for example, like I said, we have 13 companies, probably 20 factories, etc. One of the biggest problems we have is there are nations that support industrialization. There are nations that support job creation. And there are nations that are there to say, I want to make it for my own market and export the rest. But we have nations in this continent that don't support industrialization. They are pure importers. They are proud to say we import and we export raw materials. You enter a plane and you see Belgian chocolate from 1879. 1879, there's a Belgian chocolate company. There is no African chocolate company from 1995. And that is where you find countries that are, let me push it out and let me bring in whatever I need. And in that instance, moving from Nigeria to Cote d'Ivoire doesn't matter to them. I have a port. I will import what I need to consume. There's transshipment into the landlocked countries that I need to get it done. Whether that border exists or not, free traders get things to happen. So what we find is a system that, even if from a documentation, ease of documentation standpoint makes sense, from a digitization standpoint makes sense, from a formalization standpoint makes sense, it doesn't make sense for a local manufacturing standpoint. So when Africa starts to talk about, oh, We want to have a free trade area. We should trade with each other. Who makes the items to trade? You have to also encourage people to make it. I was talking to my brother George. I said, look, how far? How's business? He said, I'm at 30% capacity. Farouk, how far? How's business? I'm at 25% capacity.